Hi, hello, and welcome. Today it's a bit more complicated than usually, and I will tell you why. But today, we're not really gonna be doing a lecture in the traditional sense. I'm gonna just try and draw my figures like I normally draw them. I'm gonna be putting emphasis on some concepts that I think I've been lacking recently, and you guys will watch and hopefully learn something from it, and that's the plan for today. I have tea. This is puer. I think this one is like 2005, 2007 from Yunnan. Very dark, as you can see, pretends to be. I really like this tea, and I've been drinking it for a long time because I bought a whole pie. Anyways, without further ado, let's get to it, eh? I'm using printer paper today because I just don't really like the properties that this has. It feels a bit unsmooth. So we're just gonna try it with printer paper. And hopefully, we'll succeed as well. Okay. This is my green pencil. And let's get to it. So I've been critiquing myself and saying that I don't study the sort of fundamental form enough. So let's try and sort of see the fundamental gesture of this drawing. So I would say in here there's a really prevalent curve like this, right? That kind of curves into the rest of the body, just like that. And this I would say is kind of the basic idea, which I hope you can see. And this is usually why I don't use pencils, because I kind of find out that you see absolutely nothing that I draw. But you know what, let's just try and move it down a little bit. I don't think I can move it. Oh, oops, it'll fall. Okay. Well, I don't think I can move it down a whole lot more, guys. I'm sorry. Actually, I think even this might be a little bit much, but... Okay. It's visible, at least somewhat. Anyways, this is the fundamental sort of idea. I started with this kind of thing. If I ever get a new computer, I'll do these digitally, but I just don't have the gears for it. I'm sorry, guys. Then we'll do some wrapping circles. This picture is somewhat a photo, or pose, or gesture, whatever. Has a lot of, I would say, kind of rhythms to it, but also like perspective. So we're kind of going to try and introduce some of those wrapping lines that kind of convey that perspective. So I would say his legs kind of end here somewhere in here, and we can immediately kick off into like a gesture. So this would be one of his buns, kind of goes down like that, and we go from that above, like this. You know, convey it with a wrapping line. Again, wrapping lines very important, very cool. Simplify your job a whole lot. And I might have extended it a little bit too much, so we'll kind of go back into a leg like this. Can even draw a thumb. It's not nice. And frankly, the rest of the leg. This is something you genuinely want to leave for later, but since this is just kind of me drawing, I'll combine some of the steps, you know, at points where I feel they can be useful. So this is combining some anatomical landmarks, just because I kind of want to, you know. It's figure drawing. It's not rocket science. I can do whatever I want, and it should usually be fine. Right, we said it's kind of curves around here, so let's try and get that curvature from this kind of visible. So it's curved like that, I think, and we really want the gesture sort of to be visible here. So I'll do something like this, kind of, you know, and from that I'll go into the rhythm of the leg. So I think the rhythm of the leg will probably start around here, like that, maybe into the back of the leg, in here. maybe something like this would probably work. Of course, wrapping lines to convey the perspective, because it might not be entirely clear. Like he's sort of stretching it. Goes into this sort of extended. I'm not sure if it'll fit. Oops. Just about fits, right? And this I would say is the basic idea of the leg. We can kind of render this a little bit more to make it clearer, of course. We don't really have like a lot of restrictions. We can add some anatomical landmarks to make it a little bit clearer. I think the sort of general idea here is kind of conveyed well enough. And now we can kind of get into, I would say, the head and the hands. So in here I would say the hands are somewhat more important than the head, though we can do the head first. So the head I would say is kind of pushing against this, looking a tiny bit up. So we're gonna make a counter line here and just kind of get the head going. Something like that. I would say that's a good head. We're gonna be rendering this drawing as well because I think you guys are, I wouldn't say ready, but I would say it's time to introduce the sort of concept of some of the rendering. So I know we started with like box drawings on top of this, but we might just try to do a little bit more than just that, honestly. And you know, we'll see. Okay. He's holding himself up. So remember, there's a line here. They're both kind of holding themselves up in the same place. So I'm gonna have to move this like that. Convey his hand, holding the chair. Can even somewhat render the chair to be a little bit clearer that it is in fact a chair. So this chair has 3 legs. 1, 2, kind of here, a little bit vague, 3. Cannot get a moment of silence in this household. Jesus Christ. Anyways, I'm not even sure if you guys hear it, so it's fine, probably. If you do, I do apologize for it. It is outside of my control. Anyways, yeah. And then we kind of branch out. And the other arm is frankly invisible, but we can kind of do it here, the basic gesture of it. Sort of draw that. We've got the other hand as well. And yeah, this is a fairly dynamic drawing, I would say. Just like the basic gesture of the guy. No, of course we didn't. We can draw this too. That's fully with the features. I would say somewhat accurate. Pretty dynamic. And of course we can start drawing the anatomical landmarks from this. So if I would take my red pencil and try to draw the anatomical landmarks, we could start with the torso. Yay! So I would say the torso here, and specifically, I mean the rib cage, goes something like this, where it kind of follows the line here, right? But it's a little bit curved, maybe a little bit like this. It's not entirely straight. Something like that, right? It's a bit awkward to draw it with a different color, I'll be honest with you. Kind of undermines, honestly, the gesture on top of it. Maybe I should be doing this with the same color, or at least the same intensity. Because that would be the rib cage. And then the pelvis here, I think it's kind of visible what the pelvis is doing, but we can run a lot more, where it's just literally, you know, box like this. It's just a tiny bit more central. Right, so those are the basic anatomical landmarks. And then on top of this, you can do the sort of advanced, or just like rudimentary splitting. So I'm gonna drink some tea, and let's get to rudimentary splitting of the image, or you could say construction. Alright, so we'll get here, and we'll start from this, which is the top of the pelvis, and we'll get, you can see that kind of in the drawing here, that there's a little bit of a line, something like this, which is what is on top of the pelvis as well. So this is kind of how we know we've got it correct as well, which is nice, though not necessary. We can extend the line here, split it, end it around here, and this is going to be one of our sort of, I guess you could say, landmarks, yeah. So we've just split the legs into two sections. The sections I'm splitting it into at the moment is when you take a leg like this. A leg generally has the shape of a cylinder, right? Kind of something like this. That's kind of a leg, or at least one section of the leg. So what and you know, then there's the knee. Kind of do the knee like this, and the knee obviously splits into a second kind of cylinder, right, which is the second part of the leg, a little bit thinner, same length, though it might not look like it in here. And then there's like the actual, you know, leg. I'm just doing simple shapes right now. We can do that like this, I guess, and you know, and whatever. You get the point. Okay, so this has to be longer. Anyways, when you do that, we are splitting this leg that starts from the start of the pelvis. We're splitting it into this part. It goes from the start of the pelvis to the knee. That's one part. This is where 3 of the muscles are. That'll be one part of the leg. And then the second part, which goes like this. This is the sort of second muscle group. And this is a sort of structural splitting. I might do it with a different color, just so it's more clear. This is a sort of structural, I would say, splitting of the things, kind of based on the muscles that are in the leg. You can also just split it into a cylinder. That's fine too. And then if you were drawing the muscles, you would split the cylinder into this, like that. Right, so we're kind of skipping that and immediately doing the cylinder. I'm gonna blur these a little bit so they don't interfere with drawing. Anyways, then the bottom leg, we are doing a similar thing where we split it first like this into just a cylinder. And we're gonna be sticking with cylinders, for instance, for the arm, for even a little bit longer, because there it's even less obvious than legs. But then obviously we know that it splits into 2 sections. One of them goes like this, and the other goes like this. The other goes like this, where it's quite a bit larger, quite a bit more forward, and goes down. And you might be familiar with this sort of, this position. What you might not be as familiar with is that the tibia goes like this. So we're also incorporating that because it feels more fluid. This isn't like the best rendering of the leg, obviously, it's a bit stubby and stuff, but the general ideas are there, and that's important for us right now. In this actually not so stubby and a lot more detailed drawing that we're doing. Anyways, so that's what this is. That's representing this section. So we've done that. And then the leg. So we're splitting the leg into 2 sections. In here, there are really 2 muscle groups that kind of interfere. They kind of surround the leg. So the leg normally would have sort of shape like this, right? We can just draw a simple leg. Like that. This would be the knee. Then you kind of know about this, right? This section from the back of the leg kind of goes into the foot. Well, this splits into 2 sections like this, goes down, and kind of surrounds the leg. just like that. It's sort of tangible 3D thing that you can kind of see on the leg, and we're in the process of drawing that here. So we'll just have a little sign. You can kind of see it on the guy as well. It's not really major. Just the wrapping line there, and yeah, that's it. Just move down the intersection. Everything else is kind of whatever. Though we will do a slight indication of the tibia here, and that's it. We're done. We don't need to do much more. Right? This is good enough. The feet we've already done, so we will probably be talking about the feet and hands specifically in separate lectures. I don't think there's any point sort of discussing them in detail, because they are pretty difficult and more of like their own thing. So we're not going to be discussing those. The butt we've done here. Normally when you do a butt, you would kind of look at the pelvis. So let's draw the pelvis. Going to be using a cube as the pelvis here, right? But we might indicate these guys. The end of the pelvis, it has a kind of shape like this. And after that, you can kind of do this from both sides. Little butterfly, and this kind of shows you where the intersections are going to be for the butt cheeks. So this would be one, this would be the other. Something like that, and these are separate. So if you split them like this, it's a little butterfly, right? You kind of get a fairly convincing, I would say, butt. So it is a little bit of a butterfly, a little bit of that. From the side, this is a lot more complicated, and the way I would generally suggest simplifying it is when you got the pelvis. So let's say this is the pelvis. Just kind of draw a circle on it and imagine it like a car tire. So there's a sort of this shape here, kind of snailish. Goes from the outside, but generally everything will kind of go into the inside, just like a car tire would. And then obviously here's the muscles that connect the leg, and that kind of goes down. But outside of that, it's kind of like a car tire, so you can really imagine it like that. And that's it from the side. We've done a little bit more structure on top of it. I think you should think of gesture sort of as a inner step between drawing structure and drawing like anatomy. So this is structure, just very basic, rudimentary sort of bones and stuff, splitting down the body into forms, and then on top of that you do stuff like muscles, like this, but even like with all the muscles there, right? Generally, you don't really need to get into muscles and stuff. You just need to do some structure. But it is useful to know, and we will be discussing it in the future. Not yet, though. But this, the process of gesture, is really important as a in-between step between doing those three. Don't think of it as a drawing style in itself. It isn't. It is not a drawing style. It's a step. It's the first step in the equation of the making a figure drawing, of drawing a human, is gesture. And it makes it easier for you, it makes you guarantee that it is dynamic, and it makes it look nice. So I do recommend doing gestures. I do want you to do gestures when you want to do this technique. We're still going to break some of these into the rudimentary forms that we were talking about. I'm not done yet. And I will also I guess I'll ramble a little bit while we do that. So, even though I'm kind of the authority here, I'm obviously not that proficient in doing this as well, especially when it comes to the third step of sort of doing the, not just structure, but also like the anatomy. I start getting a whole lot worse, right? I'm not that great at anatomy. I'm good enough, but I'm not great. You can avoid doing a lot of anatomy with sort of smart rendering and knowing, oh, I know there's a muscle there, but I don't need to draw the full thing. I can just kind of use light to my advantage, which is most of my drawing if you look at them, and that's okay, because most of the time that is sufficient. But you will kind of need to learn anatomy eventually, and I've obviously learned some of it, but that doesn't mean I don't try to avoid it, though I will probably have to revisit it a lot. But even like the first step, the one with pure gesture, I'm not good at. I'm not sure if you kind of notice, and especially some of my, I guess the live stream for instance, I'm not that great at gesture. I do all of these things and how important gesture is, but I haven't mastered gesture myself. I'm in a couple of courses. I'm reading a couple of books to sort of improve it, especially Michael Matesi right now, and that's why I think a lot of my gesture kind of gets a lot better as the course goes on. But I think there's something really useful in drawing on the camera and sort of teaching you guys about gesture while practicing it myself, because that kind of leads me into developing a better understanding of gesture even for myself, and I find that really important. So I'm progressively getting better with these lectures, just as you guys are getting better, and especially when it comes to gesture. And the more I do of these lectures, the more I realize how important sort of the steps I'm outlining them are, because sometimes I don't do these steps, or a lot of the times I forget that these are the steps I'm myself preaching, and then my gesture looks off, then my drawings look off, and I can show you some of them that I've tried to do where I didn't really, I guess it was either a bad day for me, which is possible, or I didn't follow the steps exactly, or not exactly, but I didn't have the right sort of framework of thinking about gesture drawing, and it resulted in some really, I would say, subpar gestures. We can look at those. If you let me pause this for a second, I'll show you. So here are some of my very recent structural or gestural things. This is just a cool thing I found, not really gestural. I just started doing a whole lot of structure here, so this is kind of like a very structural way of rendering with a pen. I think this is a gel pen, the cheapest ones you can find, really cool. But what I really wanted to talk about is these guys. This guy I think was fine, but you can kind of see how the gesture is lacking a little bit, right? He isn't doing an especially dynamic pose. You can see some gesture here, especially with the arms. They were obviously sketched in a way that's forceful, here too, but the body's kind of a little bit stale. I think this one kind of pulls it off pretty well, though the leg here could definitely go lower and maybe a lot more into perspective. I think this leg especially is very problematic. If you obscure it, it looks much better, and the knees, this knee especially, could be higher. But it's sort of the rendering of, I see the light and I sort of take advantage of it, right? There's not a whole lot of anatomy going on. There's just the major landmarks and some light, and knowing how light works when you kind of split the stuff. So this is very a very structural drawing, not really an anatomical drawing. But the structure here, as it holds up quite well, so I would say it's good, except the leg here. I don't know what happened there, okay? This, however, is a whole lot worse, isn't it? And I think you can see how kind of the gesture is weak, the structure is even weaker. It's just not a good drawing. This didn't work out at all. And yeah, I kind of wasn't following my own advice. There isn't really a whole lot of dynamic gesture here. And this leg, for instance, is pathetic, right? This leg should have gone way further, would have been way more dynamic, but even the arms are kind of I don't know what they're doing. The neck is strange. It's just a bad drawing overall, which happens sometimes. But there is something good that came out of it. I think the leg, this leg especially, if you just look at that leg, nothing else. I'm just gonna hold it like this. Just look at that leg without the relation to anything else. It's quite good. It's very dynamic. It looks amazing. So even like following some basic gesture on that leg really helps it pop out. Much more than sort of the rest of the whole drawing, in my opinion. Otherwise, really bad, really bad. And right before this lecture, I in fact did a gesture drawing. Oops, my team might be ready. Right before this lecture, I did a gesture drawing too, where I just focused on being super, super dynamic. And I think, regardless of how small it is, it looks quite nice, right? Fuck. Sorry. It looks quite nice, right? So this is just a very minimalist, very much only, I would say, gesture. Nothing else in there. You can barely see the arms, just pure gesture, really fast drawing, and it looks nice. So it's really about sort of focusing where you want to put the gesture, what the gesture is for you, and how you want to capitalize on it. And if you do that properly, it can really help you sort of shine. Okay, so we've done a little bit of that, a little bit of breaking down the forms. Let's do some rudimentary shading, but not a lot at all, just a tiny bit, okay? And we can even start drawing the face a little, just so you can kind of see how this drawing sort of would develop if I were to finish it, which, since this is a video, we can. And I am sort of aiming towards that stage. So I'm going to draw the nose here, just a very simple nose, right? Got that. I kind of realized the head is a little bit small, right? And sometimes you can kind of find out that some things you did were not entirely accurate, especially when it comes to sort of finishing stuff like the head. For me, the head especially kind of can be tricky in this department, because sometimes getting the facial features to be in an appropriate like dimension to the head as well can be tricky. But I mean, hopefully in here we got it right, and I think we did. This looks accurate enough. So that's the head, right? We got some hair in there. Now kind of muscle here. And we didn't draw this properly, but the muscle here kind of goes down, right? We did that with the initial gesture. We'll kind of build on that. Make a second one here. Kind of already did that, right? So this is nothing new. We already had that, but we're just kind of putting more emphasis on it. And now we can start with some very rudimentary shading. So I'm just going to take this, right? And do a sort of diagonal, just pure tone, nothing complex. We're not going to be rendering forms. We've already did that with wrapping lines. We're just going to look where the shade begins, do an outline, and then kind of trace it. So in here the shade goes. We're going to actually act as if the shade were going on the forms that we've drawn. So we're not going to just try and copy what we see. We're going to kind of try and draw it as if we were, you know, shading just the thing that we've drawn. Though obviously we're going to be taking inspiration from the photo because that's easier. And also that is what we're drawing mostly, right? We're changing it a tiny bit, but that is mostly what we're drawing. So you can kind of make the shade itself a little bit of a thicker line. That'll kind of look good. I don't really know how to describe it. It just looks good when you do that. I'm sure it's a technique. There is a like color chroma change when you draw when like the light ends and the shadow begins. So I think that's sort of what this is describing and what it looks like. but I just do it because I've seen other people do it and it looks really nice. That's my reasoning, but if I had to justify it, I would probably say it's because of the chroma change that kind of comes with it. I can't say for sure though. And yeah, you might recognize that this is a very similar concept to like negative space, which in a way it is. We're just kind of I think a more apt description would be that it's like very rudimentary shading, which is also what it is, right? But negative space wouldn't be entirely inaccurate, because I mean that's what negative space ultimately is, sort of like a two-tone rudimentary shading. I'm gonna get the leg a little bit more clear, just so it doesn't look as, say, a little. It looks kind of wrong, right? So let's fix that a little bit. Though these are very specific parts, you can always like edit them if they look wrong. Nothing wrong with kind of going back to something, refining it. Actually, I would say that's advised, if anything, but you know. Okay, you go here. Kind of folds. See a fold here of the skin. Right, so this is the end of the butt cheek. Kind of folds. So we're going to do that. Shade it. And I overdrew it a little bit, so let's kind of correct that. Right, and this kind of follows it. And then it goes like this. So if you identify the light source, in here it would be coming probably from here. Right? Then it's somewhat easier for you to work with it. These shapes, and here this will be an interesting part, because normally you might kind of want to do a line here, but obviously we know that that's not the case, so we need to go up, right? Because that's why we use the wrapping lines. This kind of conveys us how the shade's going to go, and then around, right? So we kind of convey what this is, and it also casts a shadow, so something like this. We kind of have that. We can again just shade it with this very simple two-tone hatching, kind of. Right, the leg, very same, very similar. And now we do the same for here. You know, and be careful to emphasize some of the landmarks, just so it's a little bit more clear. So I'm emphasizing this landmark. I will emphasize this fold here, kind of, right? I'll put emphasis on the elbow here, because this whole thing is now going to get covered in the shade, right? Oops, a little bit further here. And the arm kind of folds, so you probably want that fold to be visible, right? Because that's a very intense shade, so it'd probably be something more like this. Kind of folds here, deltoid. It's a little bit of muscle, right? Deltoid kind of goes like that. The rest of the arm. And yeah, this is all covered. Of course, since this is the back, they also have these guys. God. These guys, right? The things you have on your back as well. Wait, I can get a picture for you guys, because I'm super nice, and I have a really good book. Yeah, this is, by the way, the method we're roughly following for Michael Matesi. Stuff like this is essentially what we're doing. So, though this is already with some muscles, so if you're interested in that, I recommend reading his books, because we're essentially following the sort of lessons he would give himself. Though you are getting it from a much more amateurish person who has read the book, though, so I have that under my belt at least. I will just try, yes, these guys. So this thing, so we're putting that on there, right? the shoulders. I don't know how it's called. Wait. It's I can't find it, so you're just gonna have to trust me. And when in doubt, you can find it yourself. So we're gonna put those on there. Right. Just gonna put those on there. And yeah. It's gonna give us like an area to shade as well. We're gonna shade the rest of the arm, which kind of already have. Hand, and the hand here. Now we kind of shade the chair, not just shade it, just draw in, kind of so we know what's happening. And yeah, this is kind of our first, let's say, rendered, very lightly rendered, but rendered nonetheless, just a drawing, right? Probably going to be scanning some of these and putting them on my Insta, so, or maybe in the thumbnail of this video, but I hope you understand sort of what's happening here, and yeah, that's it. That's basically the process. Of course I didn't. Right, I should also do that, because we have got the sort of now it's a lot more accurate, I apologize. Yeah. And honestly, seeing as it's 40 minutes, I might call it here. That's the lecture. Just one drawing, sort of in detail, described, I would hope. You found some very useful knowledge. If not, I do truly apologize. I'm doing my best, but I'm not a professional, guys. I am nowhere near a professional. I'm barely a hobbyist, okay? I just draw for fun, and I haven't even been drawing for that long. Don't put too much weight into what I say. Okay, I'm not a professional. Anyways, this will be the drawing we've ended up with, and I hope you all learned some lessons from this, and I hope I will see you in the next lecture, knowing what to expect, and knowing that none of this is difficult as long as you have the sort of necessary steps. And yeah, see you guys next time. Bye bye. And I will now drink some of the tea I had. It's very good. Very dark too, right? Very dark. I like butter. Bye bye.